23 minutes past 3 here on SABC News. Thanks very much for staying with us here on SA Today. Gender-based violence has been highlighted as one of South Africa's most pressing problems. In his address on Wednesday evening, President Cyril Ramaphosa described gender-based violence as the country's second pandemic after COVID-19, with no fewer than 21 women have been killed by men in recent weeks. Now, to talk about what role men can play in the fight against gender-based violence, we're now joined via Skype by Mbuyiselo Botha, the Commissioner for Gender Equality. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Botha, and thank you so very much for joining us here on SABC News.
Good afternoon, Flo, and thank you for inviting me.
You know, we're having this again, yet another spate of gender-based violence incidents in the country. And I always wonder what causes this. You know, you'll have a situation where we have so many, femicide cases, the murder of children, and then it might be quiet for a little while and then it comes right back again. Is it fair to even ask, what is this really attributed to? Why are we seeing this happening right now?
Well, so there are many reasons. One of the most important reasons that one can talk about this afternoon is that, Flo, we commit these murders because that we know that we can literally get away with murder. The point I'm making is that, Flo, if as South African men, you know that when you commit this murder, chances are that you'll be caught up. You will not be able to do it willy-nilly. So it's important for us to heighten the level of arrest that people know, men in particular, that I would know that there is a high chance of me being arrested. So we need to beef up our detective work or visible policing, so that so undoubtedly I would know that I would be arrested.
Yeah, with women, some will say, it was a case of a couple maybe having an altercation. Sympathizers of abusers would often say that. But the fact of the matter is that we're in a situation where we're seeing the murder of children, children being killed in the most gruesome of ways. I mean, recently we heard of a young girl, Ansia Kea, who was found in a burnt bush. What are your thoughts about the fact that this violence, is not just perpetuated on against women, but really innocent small children? What is that about?
Well, Flo, again, it's about the sense that children and women belong to us as men. This sense of ownership that if I have a kid with you, then it's easier for me to get back at you by killing someone that you love. So there's this sense of that they are a possession, that women in our country have been turned into male possession. That's why we even have these problematic wording such as our children, our wives. I mean, this element of possession is problematic, but then it in fact manifests itself in taking lives, because then, Flo, you don't think twice. You are of the view that I own them, they belong to me, and if all else fails, I will make sure that I kill them or I hurt them.
You talk about, you raise these two very important words, possession, ownership. And I wonder, is the violence then related to unequal gender relations, whether it is at home, in the workplace, or in public spaces, that makes men believe that they have this ownership or possession over women and children? And if so, how do we get men to accept that, gender relations, are changing? There isn't any of this ownership and that women are essentially equal to men.
Well, we have to start at the beginning. I mean, Flo, the emphasis has always been on talking to the girl child. Don't walk at night. Speak in a particular manner. Speak in a particular manner. Now, we have to change that. I mean, I have to say to my sons, I have to say to Lireku that, look, Lireku, Zukhanye uqaqambe, is in fact your equal at a very early age. That I don't have to say anything to Sikhanyo Kakambe. I have to focus on my grandson that, look, you don't owe anybody. The woman's body, it is her body. Unless we do that, we will continue to say or to do what we're doing until cows come home with no visible practical outcomes. So we have to change the narrative.
Yeah.
We have to focus on how do we raise our children. That means we have to go to our mosques, we have to go to our temples, we've got to go to our traditional settings, we've got to go to our churches. It means all of us. It has to be a new type of a narrative throughout the world. But we must shift flow from focusing on the girl child, because girl children don't rape themselves, girl children don't harass themselves. It is us men from an early age where these possession ideas are inculcated in us from a very, very early age. So we have to have a radical departure and a mindset shift flow if we are to arrest or to deal decisively with GBV in our country.
Do you see the situation changing? I mean, I hate to be sort of negative about it, but I watch the news. I sit here and I read the news, and there's always stories about the murder of women and children, and at some stage you kind of give up and go, well, maybe this is just, how it is, and this is the reality. And, how do we move from that? I mean, I hear you talking about the fact that we must start at the beginning, and that, some of us who are raising boy children must also be accountable in how, the messages that we give our boys. Do you really see this pattern, and I hate to call it a pattern, changing and really society changing? Or are we, 10 years, 20 years from now, going to still be dealing with this sort of violence that we see against women and children?
I think so. I'm an eternal optimist that we have no option. We have no option but to remain steadfast in what we do. And then, fortunately, in our country, the first citizen. I mean, you have a president in our country who is leading from the front. Yeah. You have a president who says, look, it's not a woman's problem, it's a man's problem. So we have no choice, not at all. We can't afford to be despondent, we can't afford to be dispirited. In fact, we have to up our game. We must continue to do what we do because this has taken generations. Imagine, Flo, how many of us were raised believing that women are subhuman beings, women are inferior. So it's going to take a while to change all of these beliefs that are toxic, even to ourselves. So the point I'm making to all South African men is we have a duty to call each other, one another out. And fortunately, with a president who says these things will not happen in our name as men, who calls on traditional leaders, religious leaders, all of us must have hands on deck. We can't afford the luxury of giving up. No, we can't. We can't, Flo.
I'd like your view and your analysis really on the role that we, in the media play. The media is the media part of the problem or part of the solution in addressing gender-based violence? And I think that we ourselves also need to introspect as to how, we report on these cases or how we project these cases. What role does the media really have in shaping the way that society thinks when it comes to gender-based violence, understand really and talk about violence within our communities? I mean, how are we faring as the different media players in terms of talking about gender-based violence? Because I sometimes worry about how we ourselves bring it to the public.
I must be honest with you. The South African media has come to the party. You have, if you read every day, editorials. If you look at our television, all of them, be they national broadcaster yourself or private, you have a situation where people are conscious. I must be honest with you that you have men and women in editorial boards who are in fact are sensitive, in how they report. And saying so, it means that I give a thumbs up to the South African media in the sense that it has centered a GBV in our country. I mean, you don't have this lopsided type of reporting. You have men and women who make it a point that we have a voice. You have men and women who believe that organizations such as a Commission for Gender Equality have a greater role to play. I mean, you have organizations such as Ilitalabantu who almost every day are speaking out based in Cape Town. And they're reported on. And the reporting has dramatically changed. There's sensitivity flow. There's also understanding. There's empathy. I can't, for the life of me, fault the South African media in how responsive and responsible it has been, and it continues to be in talking about violence against women in particular.
All right, we'll just leave it on that semi-positive note there, and thank you very much for that glowing report. Mbuyiselo Botha, we always appreciate your time here on SABC News. Thank you very much for that.